Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our strategic conversation today with Emily O'Reilly, the European Ombudsman. Thank you very much, Emily, for joining us. You're in Dublin, I'm in Brussels. We're still in lockdown, exiting slowly, carefully, cautiously, step by step, but travel restrictions aren't out just yet. So we're still where we are at the moment. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for these strategic conversations that become very popular. In the past few weeks since the lockdown, we've gone online and we've talked to all kinds of very, very wonderful, inspiring people. We've looked at EU Asia policy, we've looked at EU foreign policy, we've looked at what's happening in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and we've also had discussions on the European situation in this COVID-19 era. And today we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the European challenges in this time of COVID-19. And who better to do that with than the European Ombudsman, Emily O'Reilly. Thank you again for joining us. I've known Emily for several years now, and I think her work, her dedication, and her pursuit of truth and transparency in the European Union is really remarkable. I've had the privilege, Emily, of working with you and knowing also some of the ombudsmen, the really brilliant people that you work with in your network. And we know that in these COVID-19 times, there are many challenges facing Europe. We've talked about populism creep, authoritarianism creep, and through it all, you have to stay online, you have to be vigilant, and you have to take measures. So I was wondering, first of all, my question to you would be, how are you doing this in this COVID-19 era? But let me just say that you've been re-elected in December, another 5 years in charge of this organization, a very competent organization where you have many female colleagues. So you're the head of it, but you're also surrounded by a wonderful female and very competent team. So how have you, Emily, readjusted, adjusted, adapted to this COVID-19 era in terms of your organization, but also in terms of the issues that you're bringing to the fore? Please.
Well, first of all, good morning, Shada, and good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see you, Shada, even if only virtually. Yes, indeed, we've had a wonderful collaboration over the last number of years, and thank you for that. We've actually been managing very well. We did have quite a developed system of teleworking within the office, and we rolled that out immediately to everybody, and we were able to, from day one, still do our work, still handling complaints. We have our regular meetings, obviously through mediums like this, and we last week we were able to publish our annual report. Obviously, I wasn't able to do the usual handover to the President of the European Parliament. We published quite an important recommendation in relation to the European Banking Authority, which I think we'll probably talk about later. So we're doing surprisingly well, actually, and it's thanks to the great colleagues that I have and the wonderful people in IT as well who keep us all connected in this way.
Right, so we've been getting some comments, and just to say to all of you watching us just now, you can go on Twitter, hashtag FOE debates, and send in your questions and comments to Emily O'Reilly and myself, and we'll bring them up in this conversation. Now, Emily, you talked about how you've been online and you've talked to your colleagues, but you've also done something quite remarkable, really. You've been in touch on webinar with your members of your European network of ombudsmen. And I'm sure that from countries like Croatia, from Greece, from others, a number of issues that are very, very significant and challenging for the European Union have been brought to the fore. And I was wondering if you could give us a taste of the kinds of challenges your colleagues in the European and national governments face.
Yes, we had a very successful webinar yesterday with over 30 ombudsman offices throughout Europe, represented from Bulgaria to Greece to Sweden, the UK, and many countries in between. And I mean, if you see the basic role of an ombudsman as being protecting citizens from bad decision making, then you can see that we have a major role. And it was very interesting to see the focus that different ombudsmen had. Obviously, we all have the same general experience, but then a lot of experiences are very, very unique to particular member states as well. So obviously the most important piece of work the Ombudsman have been doing is trying to protect the most vulnerable, whether it's the elderly, children, asylum seekers, people with disabilities, also prisoners, people in institutions and so on. But we also had Ombudsman talking about their concerns about the erosion of fundamental rights. We had an Ombudsman talking about the governance of artificial intelligence, and a lot of our countries are thinking about or have already brought in apps which are going to monitor our improvements essentially in relation to attempting to contain the virus. But when does that end, and what about our privacy rights and so on? You had, for example, the Basque Ombudsman, a small piece on one level, but very important. He was managed to have payments that would generally be made to schools to pay for food, school meals for children coming from underprivileged households. That now that money is going to be directly paid to the family so that these children don't miss out on nutrition. The Bulgarian Ombudsman was talking about a problem in her country in relation to monopolies in the energy section, and the fact that in the energy sector, and the fact that prices are rising. That's a problem for people who have lost their income or so on, or existing on a lot less. So you have the Italian Ombudsman obviously talking about the situation there, and the Dutch Ombudsman, an interesting one, which is that obviously the Netherlands still has territories in the Caribbean, and he was talking about the problems there. He has jurisdiction there as well, and particular problems of poverty and deprivation there. So it really was a wonderful way of really getting a sense of the cross-European issues that are affecting citizens.
So an array of issues, Emily, and very, very different types of issues. What is the guidance that you've given them? What are you saying to them in terms of pursuing these very important issues? What do they need to do, and how do they need to do it?
Well, I don't think they need guidance from me. They're all highly competent, and in fact, I get a lot of guidance from them in relation to the way that they're doing about their work. I mean, I think the most important thing is remaining visible to citizens, I think, and letting people know that they are still there for them, that even though most of them are working from home, like I am, and their staffs are as well, that the Ombudsman is still there. And they have been able to make quite important interventions that have led to improvements in relation to the way that people are being treated in their own country. So it's being visible, being active, obviously collaborating in the way that we're doing, and being innovative as well.
And sharing experiences with you and amongst themselves as well. Now, Emily, you did something quite interesting a few weeks ago. I call it a preemptive values strike. With preemptive strike on ethics in this time of COVID-19, you sent a letter to the European Council President, Charles Michel, and to the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, and you stressed the need for transparency, all the decisions that are being taken, and you said that these decisions should be accountable and well communicated to citizens to build more trust, and the importance of actually being temporary restrictions, temporary decisions, but transparency above all. Explain why you did it so fast.
Well, we knew that the institutions were and are making incredibly important decisions, unique decisions, and decisions which still could have not just impacts currently, but long-lasting impacts. And we knew that even though they're working in a crisis, they still have to be accountable and they have to be transparent. I mean, I made the point last week that sometimes people see transparency as an abstract or an academic matter, but actually in these days,
breaking off slightly. Keep going. In these days,
because we're administrations that are making those decisions. Yes, in these days, I think the point I'm making is that we're all making decisions, very important decisions for our own welfare, for our family's welfare, and therefore they have to be based on solid facts and good advice from administrations. And therefore it is critically important that what the administration is doing, whether it's European or member state level, that it is visible, it is transparent, and that it is accountable. And that's why I wrote that, what you call preemptive.
Yes. So Emily, have you got a response yet from them? Have they given you assurances?
Well, yes, obviously, but I mean, the devil is in the detail, as they say. I mean, we continue to monitor it. I mean, we recognize a very challenging situation for the administrations, but at the same time, I think things have calmed down a little bit now. I mean, at the beginning, obviously, you could understand things were being done in a rush, in crisis mode. That isn't quite as intense at the moment, and therefore, I think they need to be looking much more at how they are making the decisions that they are making more transparent, more visible to people. Because, you know, the countries that have done well, if you can say that any country has done well in this, where because in every country people have lost their lives, but they have tended to be countries where there is a strong trust in institutions, in administrations, and in science. So you see that there is a correlation between that, and people want to be able to trust, because, you know, we're not scientists here, we're not in possession of all the facts. So we need to know that the basis on which those decisions are being made are grounded on you know, good advice and solid facts.
And it is true, isn't it, that there is a lot of confusion out there, a lot of contradictory instructions, and one country is doing one thing and the other one's doing something else, and we can't travel freely. So it is a very, very alarming time, and it is a destabilizing time on a personal level for many, many people as well. And Emily, as you pointed out, especially to vulnerable people that we tend to forget sometimes as we look into the COVID-19 geopolitics or the economics of it, etc. So I think that's a very important role you're playing. I wanted to come to one of the other preoccupations that you've had and you continue to have, and that's about transparency, accountability of lobbying. And as we are online now, it's so easy to just dial up or go online and have a chat with a commissioner or to lobby a commissioner or an EU official. In the past, you've said there's a transparency register, everything has to be documented, kept track of. Can that be done in this digital world?
Well, I mean, I think it has to be done. I mean, I've read the odd article about how lobbying is being done, and lobbyists themselves are having to transform the way in which they do it, because they can't meet in the, you know, cafes and the Parliament building or the Commission offices or wherever they meet. So obviously, presumably, a lot of their lobbying is being done like this, but the rules haven't changed. I mean, if you're having a Zoom meeting or a Jabber meeting with a commissioner, I mean, that still has to be logged by the commissioner, and the same rules apply. And it is very important, because when you see the huge decisions that are being made about which are going to directly impact our economic futures, then you can imagine that there has to be, and legitimately so, a lot of lobbying going on in relation to what those new rules, those new policies are going to be like. And when most citizens are intensely preoccupied with their own lives, their own domestic lives, you know, and the education of their children and all of that, they're not looking as much as they would be. So that makes it even more important that when lobbying is being carried out, that the same rules apply, because the decisions that are being made over the next few weeks and months are absolutely vital for all of our livelihoods, and they must be seen to be done with nothing other than the public interest being taken into account.
No, absolutely. I mean, we're going to be talking about a revised Green Deal, a new also a revised multi-annual financial framework, and a lot of lobbying is taking place already now. So those rules are going to be very important. We need to keep a log. We need to know who's saying what and contacting whom. So I think that's a very important point you made as well. Now, tell us a little bit about the decision you came to on the European Banking Authority, where you actually came out with a recommendation. That's part of your work, of course, but it comes in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis. So I said it's kind of a warning shot that rules have not changed. Is that also what you were trying to do?
Well, I mean, in this decision, in which I found that the EBA was guilty of maladministration, because it had allowed its chief executive basically to leave the job and go to one of the most significant financial services lobbying firms in Europe. And I found that this amounted to maladministration, and I made a very strong recommendation in relation to what should happen in the future. I mean, I basically said, you know, the EBA could have vetoed this particular move, but it chose not to. And I said, well, if they're not going to veto this job, then what job could they possibly veto? And I mean, I think if you connect this with what happened to the in the financial crisis, when there was a failure of financial regulation, and when there was a feeling that in some countries the financial regulator had been effectively captured by the financial service that it was regulating. And the genesis of the EBA was to deal with that and to restore public trust. It says that in its founding statute. So, I mean, in a way, by doing this, it was perpetuating the problem that it was there to that it was supposed to be sorting out. And that's why I made the recommendation that I did. And again, when you think about the EBA that make the rules and the regulations in relation to financial services and so on, I mean, that's going to be a very important part of what's going to be happening in the weeks and months ahead as we deal with the economic and financial fallout of this pandemic. So you can see how important it is for the EBA to maintain its distance from the lobbyists and to seek only to work in the public interest. And that's not, again, as I said, in relation to transparency, an abstract concept. It has actual consequences because, in the run up to the financial crisis, it was the failure of regulation that led to so much devastation around the globe. And so we cannot allow, as I said as well, public authorities to be used as proxy recruiters for the industries that they are regulating. It's simply wrong. And it's not just me that thought so, Parliament also thought so. And I think there was a lot of fallout from this. I mean, I'm still puzzled as to why people don't get that message because it is so important. I remember a few years ago reading a book written by a repentant lobbyist in the US. And, he said that the most egregious form of sort of inappropriate lobbying that damages the public trust and the public interest is the revolving door.
Exactly.
It's a revolving door, and that's it. And the argument is always made, well, people have a right to work. Yes, they have a right to work, but there's no absolute right. It has to be balanced with the public interest.
Yeah, certain conditions have to apply, and as you say, the revolving door challenge, if you like, is something that exists in every country, I think, and yes, of course one has to be vigilant. So that's a question, actually a comment that Alberto Almano, made on Twitter yesterday when we talked about the fact that I was going to have this conversation with you, and he made the point, I think it's a very relevant point, about don't we need ethics authority that can act before ex ante rather than ex post in issues to do with revolving doors and ethics?
Well, you see, there are, the institutions and the agencies and the EU institutions and bodies and agencies, they have the rules there. They can stop it. I mean, these when somebody requests permission to go to a particular job, I mean, there are mechanisms set up to vet it and so on, but somehow people don't seem to have the heart to really deal with them as they would. I don't know, is it a sense of collegiality, or is it a sense that, well, if I stop it for this person or that person, maybe in a few years' time I might be in that position and I don't want to be doing things that would damage my prospects. There has been, and there are moves to have an ethics body in the EU, and certainly we are, whatever assistance we can give in relation to that. But I think it has to be, whatever body is developed, it has to be one that is really independent and that has sanctions that are sufficiently high to prevent this sort of thing from happening. I mean, I think there's a lot to be worked out on it. I think it's always good to look at, what's best practice, what actually works, and to go ahead with that. But yes, I mean, the problem continues, and people are allowed do it. And to my mind, there isn't sufficient sensitivity or understanding of the public interest damage that is done in relation to this. And sometimes I put it very simply, just as a commissioner, let's say, would not allow somebody to come into their office and look through their files or hack their computer. I mean, that's essentially what happens when somebody armed with lots of inside information goes from the commission or the EBA or whatever over to the private sector. I mean, why else would they want them if not the inside information and network that they can provide?
Very, very good point. Emily, so as we move towards the end, there's been another comment on Twitter saying that on the issues of passenger rights, this is going to be a choice that governments will have to make between consumer rights, passenger rights, and the need to bail out airline companies that are complaining and asking for all kinds of government help. And are those the kinds of issues that you are ready to tackle as we move into the exit era, the post-COVID-19 era, if you like?
Well, absolutely. I mean, where we come into it, obviously, we don't have oversight in relation to what the member states do. We do have oversight in relation to what the EU institutions do. And if people were feeling, for example, that the Commission wasn't sufficiently strong in upholding those rights or making sure that those rights were being upheld, and a complaint was made in relation to the Commission, then of course we could deal with that.
Thank you very much, Emily, for joining us for this strategic conversation. It's been a real pleasure, but also so insightful to know how active you are online, how you're reaching out to the Ombudsman and the Ombudswoman across Europe, who face, as you've said, an array of different challenges in this COVID-19 era. We know that certain governments in Europe and elsewhere are using COVID-19 as a smokescreen for some restrictive measures, sometimes without an end and deadline set by them. And those are the kinds of challenges that you have to deal with as well as we move into the exit strategies. New issues, new challenges will come up. Citizens will be turning to you. And I think the point you've made about how we need to be transparent and accountable in these difficult times so that we can have trust in our politicians, in our policymakers. And we can only have that if the communication is strong and vital and transparent. And I think these issues that, Emily, you brought to the fore will remain with us, not just now in the post-COVID-19 era, but for always, because politicians will be politicians. And I think we always need watchdogs who look after our values and our ethics. So I hope I'll be able to see you face to face very soon. But thank you so much for joining us and really tackling head on some of the key issues that are of concerns, not just to myself, to many others who've joined us from across Europe and the world. Our next strategic conversation will be on Monday with European Commissioner Ylva Johansson, Commissioner for Home Affairs, and we'll be asking her quite a lot of questions about migration and the new compact on migration, the new pact on migration that she is working on at the moment. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And thank you, Emily, for coming online and having this strategic conversation with myself. Thank you. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone. Goodbye.